All right, well, hello, grade 8. We are moving right along here in chapter 5, and today our focus is going to be continuing to solve systems of linear equations like we did back in lesson 1 in chapter 5. But here for lesson 5.2, we're going to focus on another way of solving them called substitution. It says solve this system by substitution, check your solution. Nothing specific that you need to focus on regarding the check your solution part. As long as you do what we do on this video, you'll be all set. Now, substitution is exactly what the word means. We are taking something and replacing it with something else. Sometimes in a basketball game, there will be a substitution. Someone will come out of the game and will be replaced by someone else. Sometimes you have a substitute teacher where the regular teacher is out at an in-service or is sick. And so for that day or that period or whatever, you have a substitute teacher, somebody that's there in their place. And so that's what this is, solving the system by substitution, check your solution. Now, to solve something by substitution, you need to either have x or y isolated. You need to know either what x equals or you need to know what y equals. Now, in this example, we know what y equals. Y equals 1/2 x minus 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this equation here, the 4x plus 2y, but instead of y, I'm going to plug this in because this is what y equals. Okay? So it's instead of 2 times y, I'm going to put in 2 times 1/2 x minus 5 equals 0. All I did was replace the y with what y equals, 1/2 x minus 5. Well, then I have to clear the parentheses. So it's going to be 4x plus, well, 2 times 1/2. Anything that you need to plug in your calculator, you can, but 2 times 1/2 is going to be 1, but I don't put a 1 in front of x, so I'm going to just put x. That's a positive, so that stays a positive, okay? Then 2 times -5, well, that's -10. -10 equals 0, okay? So now I combine like terms. 4x plus x, well, that's 5x. And then minus 10 equals 0. I want to isolate 5x by adding 10 to both sides. So we do that. That leaves me with 5x equals 10. Well, if 5x equals 10, I know that 10 divided by 5, x equals 2. Okay? So now I know that my point of intersection, remember when I'm solving systems of linear equations, it's 2 lines, and I am figuring out where those lines intersect. X equals 2. So I go back to one of my original equations, and I'm going to plug in 2 for x. Well, here y is already isolated, so this is where I want to plug 2 in. So instead of 1/2 x, I'm going to think 1/2 times 2. Well, 1/2 times 2, as we talked about before, that's 1. So that whole thing is 1, and I'm going to do 1 minus 5. Well, 1 minus 5 is -4. So that tells me that y equals -4, which means my intersection point for those 2 lines is 2, -4. X is first, y is second, 2, -4. All right, let's look at the next one. This one's a little different. X equals 5y plus 3, 2x plus 4y equals -1. It doesn't matter whether y is isolated or if x is isolated. This one, I'm going to use substitution. I know what x is. So I'm going to plug this value in, 5y plus 3, in for x, and I'm going to solve y first. So this is the value that I'm going to plug in into this equation. So this is going to be 2, and instead of x, I know that x equals 5y plus 3. So I'm going to have 5y plus 3. Then plus 4y, can't forget about that. And that whole thing equals negative 1. Well, let's clear parentheses. 2 times 5y is 10y. 2 times a positive 3 is a positive 6. Plus 4y equals negative 1. Well, let's combine like terms. 10y and 4y make 14y. Then plus 6 equals negative 1. I want to isolate the y, so I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. That gives me 0, minus 6 there. That gives me negative 7. So now I'm at 14y equals negative 7, which means to isolate y, I'm dividing both sides by 14. So that tells me that y equals a negative 7 over 14. Now, if you plug that into your calculator, it's going to tell you 0.5 or negative 1/2. You can leave things as fractions as long as they're in simplest form. Y equals negative 1/2. Okay, but I'm not done, because remember what my job is to figure out where the two lines intersect. Okay, so if y equals negative 1/2, if I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go ahead, x is already isolated, so it's going to be easier to plug in the y equals negative 1/2 here. So I go to my calculator and I'm going to put in 5 times 1/2 plus my negative equals negative 2.5. That's what I get. So I come back up here, and so I'm left with x equals negative, negative 2.5 plus 3. Well, I can just go down to my calculator that already says negative 2.5, and then I just go ahead and I add 3. I get a positive 1/2. X equals a positive 1/2. So I come here, x equals a positive 1/2. That tells me that my ordered pair is x is a positive 1/2, y is a negative 1/2, and I put the parentheses there as well. But that is my ordered pair. That is where the lines cross. All right, let's move right along, because we have one more set of directions, a couple more problems we need to look at. Now, this second part says solve the system, explain your choice of method. All right, so you're not required to use the substitution method. You can do them algebraically the way we did in lesson 1. This first part here, you're going to use substitution. Okay, that's the best way to use it. It's the most straightforward way. Here, that may not be the most straightforward way. But I look at this first one, and I see that x is already isolated, because it says 4y equals x, or x equals 4y. So to me, it just makes sense in this first one to use substitution and come down to this equation, and instead of x, write 4y, because it tells us that x equals 4y. So instead of x, I'm going to put 4y. But then I'm going to have the plus 4y from here, and that whole thing is going to equal negative 8. Well, when I combine the like terms, 4y plus 4y is 8y. So that tells me that 8y equals negative 8. If 8y equals negative 8, I'm going to divide everything by 8 to isolate y. Well, negative 8 divided by 8 is going to equal a negative 1. That tells me that y equals negative 1. So I take that information and I come up here to my equations, and it seems like this would be the easiest equation to solve it into. Not too often, folks, our teacher's going to tell you to do the easiest thing. But in math, sometimes it just makes sense. It's the most straightforward. So I know that y equals negative 1. So if I come back up to this equation, I just think 4 times negative 1, because I know that y equals negative 1. 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. So that tells me that this x equals -4. X equals -4, which tells me that my intersection point where the two lines cross is -4, -1. Last one. 2x plus 2y equals 1, -x plus 2y equals -3. Now in this equation here, I don't have an equation that isolates either x or y. So in this one, I'm going to choose to do them the way we did in the previous lesson, 5.1, solving them algebraically, where I'm going to put everything in slope-intercept form. I look at this first equation, 2x plus 2y equals 1. If I want to isolate the 2y, then I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. So when I subtract 2x from this side, I end up with nothing. When I come over here, I do nothing minus 2x. So that leaves me with a -2x. And then I'm going to be plus 1. All right, when I go to this, let's just go ahead and finish this one. I'm going to divide everything by 2. So that's going to leave me with y. -2 divided by 2 is a -1. But I'm not going to put a 1 in front of a variable. So that's just going to be a -x. Then 1 divided by 2 is just plus 1/2. So that's my first one in slope-intercept form. When I look at my second equation, -x plus 2y equals -3, once again, I'm going to isolate the 2y. This -x, I'm going to add x to both sides to get nothing. So I'm going to add x to get me to 0. Nothing plus x gives me a positive x, and it's going to be a -3 here. Finish putting this in slope-intercept form. Going to divide everything by 2 again. Now, remember, if I'm going to take x and divide it by 2, please remember that dividing something by 2 over 1 is the same as multiplying it by 1 over 2. So that's how I want to show it in that y equals mx plus b. So instead of saying x divided by 2, I'm going to write 1/2 x. And then I'm going to say, okay, -3 divided by 2. And I'm just going to leave that as 3 over 2. Now I have them both in slope-intercept form. So now I'm going to set it up as the -x plus 1/2 equals the 1/2 x minus 3 over 2. All right. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add x to both sides. That's going to give me 0 there. If I add x here, that's going to be a 1x. So that's a 1.5 x. Okay? And then I'm going to add 3 over 2 to this side because I want a 0 on both sides. If I come over here and add a 3 over 2, that's going to give me 4 over 2. And I know that 4 over 2, 4 divided by 2 is 2. So based on that, I'm going to come up here and say, well, 1.5x equals 2. So I come up here, 1.5x equals 2, which means that I'm dividing everything by 1.5. Now, I know that 1.5 is 1.5, so I'm just going to go into my calculator, and I'm going to type in 2 divided by 1.5. And that equals 1.333333333. It just kind of keeps going. Okay, so I don't want to do it that way because I get a repeating decimal. I can't have repeating decimals. So I go back to my 1.5 and I think, okay, 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. That's going to be 3 over 2. So I'm going to do it as a fraction. 2 divided by 3 over 2. So I'm going to re-enter, and that happens, and this is just something you have to do, so it's good for me to kind of go over that. 2 divided by 3 over 2. Whoops, not negative. Clear that out. press the equal sign, I get 1 1/3. That tells me that x equals 1 1/3. And if you left it as a fraction, 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4. X could equal 4/3. Well, so that tells me that my x is equal to 1 1/3, okay? Or, as we said, 4/3. 4/3. However, we also now have to solve for y. So I'm looking at this second equation where x is already by itself. I know that x is 1 1/3 or 4/3. So I'm going to go ahead and put negative 4/3, because this says a negative x, and x is 4/3 plus 1/2. So I'm going to come over here, 4/3 negative plus 1/2 equals negative 5/6. That tells me that y equals negative 5/6. And my final ordered pair is x is 4/3, or the 1 1/3. Y is negative 5/6. All right. We'll talk to you later. 8th grade. Bye.